I think the first case is that Florida is clearly different from South Carolina. The panhandle of Florida, starting from east of Tallahassee, going west of Pensacola, that is southern accented country. In many ways, it resembles much of South Carolina, but it casts just 10% of the Republican primary votes. Public policy polling, the Democratic firm that's been doing frequent robocalls in the country, asked an interesting question of Floridians, Republican primary voters in their most recent poll. Do you consider yourself a Southerner or not? Well, in Florida, Republicans, 48% consider themselves Southerners, 50% do not. That's a fascinating number and an interesting thing. And of course, if you look at the preferences of those candidates, those who consider themselves Southerners, as you might expect, tend to favor Newt Gingrich. Those who do not tend to favor Mitt Romney. What would the answer to that question have been if somebody had thought to ask it in South Carolina? Do you consider yourself Southerners or not? I think it would be about 88% would consider themselves to be Southerners, and perhaps 8% concentrated in Hilton Head would say they are not. And I think so. That's an illustration of the difference. Yes, there are a lot of voters who resemble the dominant strain in South Carolina, but not that many. On Hispanics, I think I'd take issue with Henry a little bit here. I'm not sure that the non-Cuban Hispanic percentage is that high in Republican primary voters. I'm taking another look at those numbers to see if my supposition is correct. We do know that in the past, the Cuban Americans have tended to vote as a solid bloc, as they did for John McCain. His strongest county in the whole state was Miami-Dade County, where 72% of the registered Republicans are Hispanic. That's that sort of Cuban bloc vote. There's a big fight going on now, as Henry says. It's a great time to be selling advertising on Radio Mambi and some of these other Spanish-language stations in Miami. I think one of the things that's interesting here is that not only does Romney have the endorsement of the senior Cuban-American members of Congress, Ileana Ross-Layton and Mario Diaz-Balart, but he's also, I think, has something in the nature of a tacit endorsement from Senator Marco Rubio. I mean, on 2 successive days, Rubio intervened in his behalf, even though he says he's neutral. He disagreed with Gingrich's characterization of Romney as a Charlie Crist Republican. Charlie Crist, of course, was the former governor who was running for the Senate. Rubio stayed in the race against him. Ultimately, Crist, who embraced Barack Obama literally and supported the stimulus package back in February 2009, left the Republican Party and ran as an independent. And then Rubio intervened and denounced a Gingrich radio ad characterizing Romney as anti-immigrant. Gingrich then withdrew that ad from the air, suggesting that he takes a rebuke from Marco Rubio pretty seriously. That's polling right now, so far as I've seen, it shows Romney not doing well with Hispanics. I expect that to change and to go in another direction. My third point is, if you take a look at the Quinnipiac polls, the lineups, the groups that tend to favor the candidates are as you would expect. But Newt Gingrich tends to have a lower ceiling, under 60% favorable ratings, on groups that he doesn't carry. That is, people who don't identify themselves as Tea Partiers, people who are not evangelical born-again Christians, people who are college graduates, people who do have high incomes. Less than 60% are favorable to him. That suggests kind of a low ceiling for him to move up in the event that Mitt Romney moves down or for other reasons. Romney, on the corresponding groups, the other side of the coin, if you will, Romney has higher favorables among the groups he doesn't carry. He's got more room to rise. Whether he does or not, obviously, we don't know for sure, but he's got between 68 and 72% favorables. on the flip side of each of those groups, Tea Partiers, evangelicals, non-college grads, medium and lower income. Fourth, if you look at the Quinnipiac polling recently, you see that that Gingrich does rank ahead in knowledge, in experience, on foreign policy, on handling a crisis. These are advantages he goes in with. I think they're capable of being eroded. I mean, one of the interesting things in the Monday, January 23rd debate was that Mitt Romney went after Newt Gingrich on the issue of governing. He talked about his record as Speaker. He said that he'd been ousted as Speaker by his own party. He said that he had had to resign in disgrace. And you've had comments from a number of undeniably conservative Republicans, including Rick Santorum, who has a motive for saying so, but nonetheless, I think has some credibility, that Gingrich was an erratic and unsteady leader. I think that those criticisms have the potential of eroding his advantages on the qualities that we've had. Gingrich shows up weak on sharing your values. This is perhaps a reflection of his personal life, and very weak on trustworthy, which suggests a vulnerability on these other issues. On beating Obama, in the South Carolina exit poll of the 45% who selected among four alternatives able to beat Obama as a reason for their voting, they tended to favor Gingrich 51 to 37. Which suggests, a conclusion that perhaps, hey, those Lincoln-Douglas debates, he's going to wipe the floor with Obama, and that will be the end of it. This one, it shows Romney ahead on beating Obama, 49 to 35, which is more in line with poll data that we've seen in other places except South Carolina. They show defeating Obama is more important than sharing your values. So I think that those characteristics tend to favor him. Finally, there's some evidence in the polls, and I tread at the edge of the ice, or towards the thin ice here, in looking at these. But I think there's some evidence in the polls which, if confirmed by subsequent polling, suggests a movement that looks something like this: a surge for Gingrich immediately after the South Carolina result comes in on Sunday night, January 22nd, and then something of an ebbing of his support, with Romney remaining relatively even and perhaps gaining by the end of it. If you look at the two polls that were taken solely on January 22nd, the Sunday night after the Saturday result, Gingrich is leading by 8 points, and that's a big reversal from the pre-South Carolina polling in Florida, which tended to show Romney ahead by things like 40 to 26 or thereabouts. In the polls taken on two nights, January 22nd and 23rd, you see Gingrich leading by 5% and 0%, a tie in the second one. In the poll taken on three nights, January 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, with 1/3 of the respondents then having had a chance to see or absorb the news coverage of the debate that was held on January 23rd, we see Romney leading by 2 points, and if I'm correctly reading the Insider Advantage survey this morning, by 8 points. As I say, I hesitate to read too much into that data because there's a margin of error in these polls and they may not be commensurate with each other. But they do seem to suggest a narrative that points towards Romney gaining. Now, all that may be off, or it may be on more than ever, depending on the debate that's held this evening. So let me conclude with that.